this is again another lesson for dear Mr. Kilmer. It is for the questions and answers. So for this lesson, it is on people should be allowed to follow their dreams. Okay, let's look at the format. You should have 5 paragraphs. The first paragraph is the introduction, where you have the title. You have to write the author's name and a brief summary of the novel. And then for paragraph 2, you have to write evidence 1, where you talk about Richard Knight wrote poems secretly, and Joyce Kilmer encouraged him to tell others about his passion. Okay, then you have paragraph 3, where you have evidence 2. You can write about Mrs. Hanson, ask him, Richard, to read his poems in the class. And then you can have paragraph 4, where you have evidence 3. The Shermans told Richard to publish his poem in the local newspaper. And also about Pa, who helped Richard with the ideas for his poems. And lastly, number 5, the last paragraph, is a conclusion where you write the summary of your answers or your evidence. Okay, let's look at tips for better answer. So please remember to write the evidence or the event in past tense. So because it is easier to control past tense than present tense. Okay, read the question a few times to determine whether you should write about a character or several characters. So the introduction, you can write, the novel I studied is Dear Mr. Kilmer by Anne Schraff. The novel is about a farm boy, Richard Knight, who lived in Turtle Lake, Iowa. He was 15 years old and had an elder sister, Angie, and brother, Gus. The story evolved around Richard, who loved to write poetry, and his relationship with his family, Hannah Shermer, his classmates, and also Mr. Joyce Kilmer, a famous poet who joined the army during World War I. Now let's look at content 1 in the second paragraph. A character who wanted to realize his dream was Richard. Richard wanted to become a poet. Nobody knew that he wrote poetry, including his family, teachers, and schoolmates. One day, Richard learned about Mr. Kilmer when Richard's English teacher, Mrs. Hanson, read a poem to the class. The title of the poem was Trees by Joyce Kilmer. Mr. Kilmer was a famous poet, and he enlisted in the army. Richard wrote a letter to Mr. Kilmer. In his letter, Richard told Mr. Kilmer that he wrote poems too. Richard asked for Mr. Kilmer's advice. He wanted to know whether he should tell his secret to everybody. Till paragraph 2. A few days later, Richard received a letter from Mr. Kilmer. Mr. Kilmer advised Richard to overcome his fear. Mr. Kilmer encouraged Richard to be brave and overcome his fear. He asked Richard to share his poems with those he knew. Later, he also asked Richard to write to him and send other poems. Mr. Kilmer signed his letter to Richard as your fellow poet to acknowledge his ability to write poems. He told him that his poems were very fine and impressive. He encouraged him to continue writing as he might become a published verse maker in future. So now we're going to move on to content 2 in paragraph 3. Richard told Mrs. Hanson that he wrote a letter to Mr. Joyce Kilmer. Mrs. Hanson encouraged him to read the letter and share his poem with the class. When Richard was worried about the ending of the poem, his friend Hannah suggested how to write the last line. Mrs. Hanson also spent time with Richard, choosing the poems that he should be sending to Mr. Joyce Kilmer. When Richard read his poems, she had something nice to say about each one. Mrs. Hanson was a great English teacher, as she encouraged Richard to follow his dream in becoming a poet. Let's move on to content 3, which is in paragraph 4. After Richard found out that Mr. Kilmer was killed in the war between the Allies and the Germans, he wrote a poem in memory of Sergeant Joyce Kilmer as a tribute to him. The Shermans encouraged him to publish his poem. he and Hannah went to the newspaper company, and his poem appeared in the local newspaper, the Turtle Lake Weekly. In the poem, Richard likened Mr. Kilmer to the world. Richard's father read the poem. Richard was afraid that his father was going to be angry at him. His father did not like Richard writing poems. Still in content 3, after reading the poem, his father told Richard about Richard's uncle Roland. His father never told Richard about this story. Roland was killed in a war in Cuba. His father regarded Roland as his world. His father was amazed how Richard could use the same word in his tribute. Richard continued writing poems about farm life for the local newspaper. Richard got his father's help as he was an experienced farmer. Every night, Richard read his poems aloud. His father would correct or give suggestions to improve the poems. His father finally supported Richard's passion in writing poetry. So we have come to the last paragraph, which is paragraph 5, the conclusion. You can write, in conclusion, Richard faced many obstacles in his journey of becoming a poet. In the end, he managed to realize his dream with the help of several people like Mr. Joyce Kilmer, Mrs. Hanson, Hannah Schirmer, and at the end of the story, his pa also offered his ideas and suggestions. Thank you. That's all. We have come to the end of the lesson. I hope you have benefited on this lesson about questions and answers for Dear Mr. Kilmer. Thank you.